This little webinar that we're going to do here is called Breathe for the Brain. And basically, it's about how breathing is important to make sure that you actually help the brain function as well as it possibly can. A little bit about me. I am a board certified functional neurologist. So that means that I've had a whole bunch of different training in neurology. I treat people that end up having issues with concussions and other kinds of different stuff like that. Also have a bunch of other certifications and those kind of things. So I've got a little bit of knowledge when it comes to the brain and the types of stuff that it needs. So a little bit of info about the way that the body and the brain works is that it's kind of interesting that we breathe around 16 times per minute. Depends on the person. The range is somewhere between like 12 for some people and 20 is like the range that people typically breathe. And I would say that it's probably a situation that if you breathe more often, then that's actually probably not so good. So it would be better to be in the 16 to 12 than it would be to be somebody who's breathing around 20 times a minute. That's a little bit hard. It's always interesting to try to figure out what somebody's doing when it comes to the breathing, because you don't want to, obviously like tell them that you're watching their breathing, because then people don't breathe normally. It's kind of weird. But anyway, so that's a lot, 960 times per hour, 23,000 times per day, 8.5 million breaths a year ish, on average. So that's a whole lot. Obviously that changes, it goes up and down, but the quality of those breaths, it really does matter. Basically, like a couple of breaths here and there, if they're off, that's obviously not going to be like a life-threatening type of thing, but every breath really does matter. And it's one of those kind of things that it does affect your longevity. It does affect your health. So if you breathe better, then you have the tendency to fare better in life, with multiple different types of aspects. So again, obviously breathing is important because your life actually depends on it. You need to make sure that you get oxygen in order to survive, because if you don't get oxygen, things aren't going to go well for you. So basically the challenge for everybody today is, to try to take steps in order to actually breathe better, and not just breathing to survive, but trying to breathe in order to actually like thrive. So the biggest thing is that, breathing for your brain, that is one of the big solutions in order to make sure that you actually thrive. Um, you know, the brain can control all of the functions that you end up having in your body, all of the moves that you make, all the, like you can, go with the police every breath you take and all that. But everything ends up being controlled by the brain. So anxiety issues end up having, different stuff like that. I'm not going to say that doing this kind of stuff is going to, fix everything, but it is definitely it's definitely something that can help out in multiple different aspects of your life. So one of the things that's interesting is that the brain in and of itself, in order for your brain to thrive, in order for it to do well, it needs three different things in order to actually survive. It needs to have glucose, so it needs to have something to burn. It needs oxygen, which is the thing that you're going to burn the glucose with. So it needs fuel, right? And then it needs to be activated. So the activation is going to be whether or not, it depends on the pathway or the thing that you're talking about. But if you're trying to, you know, get something, either it's a repetition in getting it, or it's even repetition in trying to stop it or inhibit behaviors and other kinds of stuff like that. So again, oxygen is going to be the thing that you get from breathing. Glucose is going to be the thing that you get from foods that you eat. And again, it's glucose, fats, and other kinds of stuff. But what it comes down to is that um, we often will talk about the different types of foods that people eat. People will kind of obsess about the exercises that you're doing, but people don't really talk about how you consume oxygen, how it impacts your ability to, the frequency that you're breathing at, or how deep that you're breathing, and how that actually can affect the amount of air that you're actually getting in your system and how your brain actually functions from all that stuff. So, one of the things that's interesting is that mouth breathing has the tendency to have a negative impact on your health. So, again, there's studies that basically show that things like untreated sleep apnea, or which is basically one of the things that's associated with breathing with your mouth open, it has a significant types of reduction in the white matter content that you end up having in the brain. Again, those brain changes end up getting associated with problems with cognition, problems with mood, problems with alertness during the day, and those kind of things. Um, so that's just one of those. And again, that's not saying that you can't breathe out of your mouth at any point, but when you go and you exercise and that kind of stuff, if you are breathing through your mouth a little bit as you breathe harder, that's okay. But if your normal everyday kind of default is breathing through your mouth, then that ends up not really being uh, a good omen, I guess you could say, right? So things with mouth breathing, again, typically there's issues with fatigue, um, problems with productivity, and a poor quality of life for people who are going to breathe through the mouth rather than people who are going to breathe through the nose. And again, this is even something that can affect kids. Um, when it comes to the mental and physical health of kids, again, it can be, again, associated with restriction of the lower airways and poor quality of sleep, reduced cognition, and lower quality of life when it comes to, again, children. Again, kids that aren't sleeping well, sometimes they have ADHD, sometimes that ends up being related to breathing and sleep and other kinds of stuff like that. And again, kids that have ADHD, again, there's problems with concentration, problems with hyperactivity, impulse behaviors. And again, the breathing is going to be one of the components to making sure that your brain is firing well. Um, if you don't have, like just like when kids get tired and other kinds of stuff, if your brain isn't functioning as well as what it could, then your ability to concentrate, your ability to control like impulsive behaviors ends up going down. Um, the quality of the respiration is going to impact the function of the brain of these kids, and again, how the brain, like the rhythm of the brain, and how easy that the brain is working. Again, all of that ends up being influenced by posture, which is kind of a big deal. So again, breathing for the brain, that's a solution to try to fix some of this stuff. Um, when it comes down to it, there's a certain type of things to do when it comes to breathing with the brain. Again, the idea is that you want to try to breathe at the proper type of frequency, proper types of respirations in order to stabilize the amount of oxygen versus carbon dioxide that you have in your system. You want to breathe through your nose consciously, subconsciously, and even while sleeping if you can. Again, the postural system is going to be another thing that is going to help support the breathing through the diaphragm. Again, diaphragmatic breathing, and that is also something that has an effect on the depth of respiration. So breathing through the diaphragm, making sure that you have proper posture, all that other kind of stuff is going to have an impact on the efficiency and how well that you're actually breathing. And again, the better the efficiency, the more that the better off that your brain can be functioning. And again, this can be something that can affect all kinds of different things. It can affect pain levels, and it can affect other types of issues that people have. Because again, if your brain isn't functioning well, then it doesn't do a very good job of actually shutting down the actual pain that a person has. So when it comes down to it, a little sip here. So when it comes down to it, chest breathing in general, it requires a little bit more energy. And again, there's two different types of people that are out there. Typically, there are people who are more chest breathers, and there are people who are more abdominal breathers. And again, it's not to say that you can't do a little bit of both, because in an ideal world, I do think that you should be doing a little bit of both. But the problem is that the number of people who don't have the ability to control that, or even know what they're doing, or even aware of what they're doing, is there's a whole lot of people who have no idea um, how to control it. It's one thing, like I wouldn't expect the general population to sit there and be like, oh yes, obviously I know that I'm a chest breather, um, because it's something that you have to kind of like pay attention to, but a lot of times people can't feel what it is that they're doing. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. So um, basically, when it comes to it, somebody who is breathing with their chest, they typically have an outward and upward movement of the chest wall, which is what it's supposed to do. But again, it's, do you want the breathing to happen more with the chest or more with the abdomen? And ideally, you would want it to be more with the abdomen. But again, the chest is going to move as you inhale and exhale. So the idea is that, if sometimes you can even figure this out again by putting your hands on your chest in order to figure it out. A lot of times it's put one hand on your chest and then you would put another hand down below on your belly in order to feel it. And again, chest breathers are going to have this outward upward movement of the chest wall. And again, you can see it moving. So you'll see this raise up, right? As the person is taking a deep breath in. And chest breathing is going to have a little bit more energy because you're actually lifting out your rib cage. You have to actually lift it up. The way that I talk about this with people is that your ribs are kind of like bucket handles. So if you imagine a bucket that's like laying tip down on its side, the bucket handle would be laying down like this. When a person breathes in, you end up having that bucket handle lifts and raises, and all of the different ribs are going to be stacked on top of each other, and they're going to be attached with muscles in between. The ribs that you get, like if you go to like barbecue or something like that, the muscles that are in between basically are going to lift that up, and they're going to lift multiple different sections of it up. They can also make you breathe out harder too, depending on what's going on. But you have to actually lift up the chest, and you have to lift it up in the front and out on the sides. And then you have to, again, just let it go. And then gravity helps everything drop back down. So it takes a little bit more energy because you're lifting up the rib cage. With chest breathing, the body ends up working a little bit harder. And because that, you're not really using all of the oxygen for other types of things, because some of the oxygen has to go in towards and just be used to actually like make the body do the breathing, because it's not an efficient, it's not as good of a way to do it. Again, this isn't going to be necessarily something that's crazy, and the majority of people aren't going to have problems, but for some people that do end up having neurological issues, the breathing with the chest could be something that could actually fatigue them more easily, right? Your average person probably isn't going to notice a difference, but a person that might have had a concussion or some other kind of issue might have more issue with taking breaths with the chest. The other thing that happens is that chest breathing is something that is kind of associated with the sympathetic nervous system. So and which is basically the fight or flight response. So you can imagine that if you were going to be a person that was walking across this, while you're strapped in and you've got like a nice little harness that goes all the way down and across there, you're not going to fall and get hurt, right? You could fall down a little bit, but you're not going to actually like die off of this, because this would be something that they've got the helmet and they've got everything safe and all that other kind of stuff, but it's still going to freak people out, right? This is not going to be like very many who are going to go across and their heart isn't going to start spiking and racing and they're going to breathe faster and that kind of stuff. That fight or flight response is a normal type of a response in something like this, but you don't want that fight or flight response to be kicking in all the time. And chest breathing is one of the ways to kind of like it's associated with it, and it kind of helps to push it. The other thing that happens with chest breathing is that you also, with chest breathing, you also have the tendency to use some accessory muscles, and some of the muscles that are in the neck, along with the back, have the tendency to get a little bit tighter and cause problems. So sometimes people that are chest breathing, not only is it a fight or flight thing, and not only might they have a little bit of extra stress up in the shoulders and stuff like that, they can also end up having some neck pain and other kinds of things that are associated with that as well. So um, again, you don't want to have that fight or flight type of thing with the normal activities that you do during the day, right? You want just the opposite. You want to try to be able to control that, try to control the amount of stress that you end up having. Um, and you don't want that your body to feel like it's being chased by a tiger when there's no tiger that's there, right? That's when you start having other issues like feelings of anxiety and stuff like that. If your heart is racing for no reason and you have some of these different feelings, those are some of the issues that, it can be interrelated to that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to get into how to fix all that other kind of stuff because that's not my thing. It's not my job. But it is one of those kind of things where people do have multiple different issues that are associated with the way that they breathe and having issues associated with the sympathetic nervous system. So again, there's different things that you can do. Again, at work, if you end up being at work, or if you have like some kind of deadline that's looming over you, or if you have a stack of bills that you need to pay, or if you have the to-do list that never stops, or like the laundry that never stops, and things are just always trying to take away stuff from your time. Again, you can end up having issues where you feel like your breath is starting to quicken. Your posture might not necessarily be all that great, and that's basically you being in the middle of a stress response, right? Your heart is racing, breath is, it doesn't have to be a full on like panic kind of a thing, or, but just that low grade, like fight or flight response over a long period of time can have the tendency to bring this kind of stuff out. And that's not what we want. Stress is actually a good thing, but you want to be able to stress your body, stress yourself with exercise, and do other kinds of things along those lines, or have some kind of a stress that happens to you because that's life, and then be able to bounce back and then go back into that parasympathetic or the rest and digest state, as opposed to staying in the fight or flight response or being in that all the time, because that's actually a catabolic kind of a thing. It breaks down the body. The hormones that are associated with stress, cortisol is one of the things that ends up breaking down the body as well. So again, if you can help to kind of control the stress to a degree, and one of the ways is breathing, then you can end up basically making yourself feel better and be healthier and stuff like that. So again, being aware of your breathing is one of the ways that you can actually control your stress. Again, preventing the hyperventilation, preventing exhaustion. There's other kinds of things that can happen where people might have a situation where they get overwhelmed for a little bit, and maybe they need to do something like this breathing, whether or not you want to fully meditate or not. Again, that's something that's an option. And it's something that if you're trying to control your breathing, you can easily do a little bit of, um, you know, you can easily switch and do a little bit of meditation when you do it, but you don't have to. So, if you want, you can sit and, cross your hands and, like, do this with your fingers and om and all that other kind of stuff. There's different ways that you can do it, but that is that that is one of the ways that you can actually control stress. So somebody that ends up, maybe needing a break, maybe that gets overwhelmed, whether or not it's a student who is trying to have what do you call it? Um, if it's a student that is trying to, that might have like issues with, like ADHD or autism or something along those lines. Sometimes they can get overwhelmed and they need to take a minute. By going through and having them actually like work on their breathing and other kinds of stuff can actually help to calm them down and let them go back into the thing that they were doing and drop their stress before they get back into it. So there's a couple of different options that can happen with that. So one of the things that can kind of happen is that there's different ways that you can do some assessing on whether or not you have issues with breathing. One of them is I'll have a link on my website that I'll post here for when this is later on YouTube. I'll post it up here at the top somewhere. And for anybody that's on this, I'll actually go ahead and send that to you a little bit later, just so that you can actually get to it. But there's a link that you can go to that will have a couple of different questionnaires that you can use, and you can answer them and figure out what your score is, and you can find out whether or not, just with the questionnaire, you end up having issues with breathing. So there's a couple of tests that you can also do in order to help to give you an idea of how well that you actually end up breathing as well. A couple of different screens. So one of the things that you can do is you can take your hand, and you can take your hand and just kind of like hold it like this on your nose. Okay. So for me, it's not going to work so well because I'm talking, but if you take your hand and you just kind of like start breathing normally, this is a quick, easy way that you can tell whether or not you're not nose breathing or mouth breathing, right? So if you're breathing and if you feel it up on the top part of your hand, again, you feel it up on top here, that's going to be something that's an indication that you're nose breathing. If you're feeling it on the bottom of your hand when you're down in here, then the likelihood is that you're mouth breathing. Usually people are going to do one or the other, especially when they're at rest. Again, things kind of go out the window when you start talking about somebody who is in the middle of running, or, excuse me, or doing something along those lines. People that are running are going to have a completely different kind of situation um, than people who are not. So multiple different things, obviously, to look at and things to do. Um, so, that's one of the different things that you can do. Um, Again, if you have that hand and if you're breathing and you feel it on the bottom, then that kind of is an indication that you are mouth breathing. Um, so there's definitely something that's associated with posture. And actually, let me go back and give you one more thing with this assessment. I'm going to give you one that's a little bit more in depth. Okay, there's a test that you can do that's actually for holding your breath, and I'm not going to actually like time it out, but I'll tell you about it, and that's something that you can try. Later when this is on YouTube, if you want to pause it, you can pause it, try it, and then we can kind of go from there. But basically, one of the things that you can end up doing is that you can do a respiratory check to see whether or not you actually have like issues with breathing. And basically, what you do is you're going to take a big deep breath in, you're going to blow it all the way out, and then you're going to take another big deep breath in, and you're going to breathe as much as you possibly can, and then you're going to hold it. You're going to pinch your nose, you're going to like close your lips really, really tight, and you're going to have like a stopwatch or your phone or something like that, and you're going to time it. And as soon as you take that breath all the way in, you're going to hold it, and you're going to keep holding it, and you're going to keep holding it and keep holding it. You're going to make it so that it's uncomfortable. You're going to make it so that it is that you're straining to hold it when it comes to something like that. And you're going to hold it for as long as possible. You don't want to pass out, obviously, when you do that, so you have to be careful, but you're going to hold it as long as possible. And when you can't hold it anymore, when you take like a involuntary breath out, or when you take a when air moves at all, you stop the stopwatch. And hopefully by that point, and if you're going to do it, go ahead and pause it now. Okay. So if you go through and you do that, you should have gotten at least 30 seconds when you do that. Okay. Anything that's under 30 seconds is definitely associated with issues with breathing. But ideally, with that test, you should get more than 60 seconds. So you should be able to hold your breath all the way in and hold it for a full 60 seconds. Again, you're not doing anything. You're not, swimming while you're doing it or anything like that. You're just sitting here and you're just holding it. So your body shouldn't be using up oxygen like what would happen if somebody is breathing. Obviously, that should be something that's really, really good for somebody who's a swimmer, or really, that should be better for somebody who is aerobically active, right? But that is one of the ways that you can do a test. There's another one that's a little bit harder to do, but those are some of the different things that you can do in order to help see whether or not you end up having issues with breathing. So that's an interesting thing. If it is off, then that's something that maybe you should give us a call and come on in, and we can end up helping you get that so that your breath is actually better, and kind of go from there. Right. So posture and respiration end up being directly related to each other. Okay. It's one of those kind of things where it's kind of crazy how well it works. But when you see somebody that ends up having this posture, they can't take a full deep breath in. It's impossible. Just with your head being forward like that can end up causing you an issue with it. So what I mean by that is that right now, what I want you to do, and I'm just going to kind of turn to the side, what I want you to do is go ahead and roll your shoulders, kind of slouch down a little bit, stick your head out in front, just like it shows in the picture here. Okay. And as you're going through and as you're doing all of this with that picture, What I want you to do is I want you to take a big deep breath in, right? It doesn't matter whether or not you're sitting or you're standing. You're going to do two of these, but I want you to see how the two of them work. So again, taking like this, again, making sure that you're moving your chest and moving your belly when you do it. Again, so just still in that position with your head forward. Just pay attention to how much air that you're moving when you do it. Now go through the other way. Sit yourself up, pull your head back, pull your chin back, pull your shoulders back, and then you see the difference between the two of those. When a person is slumped forward versus when they're standing upright with their shoulders back, again, you're going to get a lot more breath. You probably, if you do this and your body is like slumped forward and you're sitting, you're not going to be able to have as good of a breath as if you were slumped forward when you're standing. But sitting is probably not going to be as good as somebody that's standing, or if you're flexed up like that, that ends up being a little bit problematic. But if you're doing the test and you're staying in the same position, they should basically be better when you end up having better posture and you have your shoulders pulled back, right? So it's crazy how well that it can change it. So taking that deep breath in um, gets way better when you end up having better posture. Um, Again, that poor posture, you end up having to physically lift up the chest because it's already collapsed in. Your shoulders are kind of jamming together. People can end up having pain in the front part of the ribs when they do that all the time. Again, and people do this kind of posture all the time. If anybody has a desk job where you're sitting at a computer, then people will sit in this with their shoulders lifted up so that their shoulders are tight. They probably don't have like the best ergonomics when they're actually doing it. Shoulders are rounded forward. You can't really see what you're looking at, so you're doing this with your head and you're bending forward, which causes headaches and other kinds of stuff. But the main thing is that it's causing issues with the chest and being able to breathe, and the lack of breathing is going to be something that can affect your pain. So there's a whole handful of different things that kind of goes with that. Again, fixing that posture makes it so that you can instantly breathe better. So one of the things that's associated with getting better at all this stuff is trying to improve your posture. Correcting one without the other, you can get a little bit of results in trying to breathe. So it's making sure that you're breathing with your abdomen and your chest. You can breathe with both of them, but you don't want to just be breathing with your chest. You also don't want to be breathing with your body bent forward in this way, because even if you're abdominally breathing and you fix that and you're not doing chest breathing only, if you're bent forward, then you're going to end up having issues breathing with your belly as well. It's not going to be able to expand as much as what it should. So one of these things is that you should be able to, again, work on feeling whether or not you're breathing through your chest or whether or not you're breathing through your belly. Again, inhale through the nose, you can exhale through the mouth, and that's fine. Doesn't matter as much. You can inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose too. That's fine. But you don't want to be sitting here all day long and just, because that's not a good situation. Again, we've talked about that with the sympathetics. So again, making sure that you're nasal breathing, making sure that you're breathing with your abdomen and not your chest, and making sure that you end up having a good posture. All three of those things are going to be something that's going to have a major impact. That can have a major impact on your pain, because your brain is supposed to actually shut off pain as a normal kind of a process. And it's one of those things that's kind of crazy. But if you've ever noticed that, like you don't necessarily like feel your watch or your ring on a regular basis, you don't necessarily feel, if you have like a dog or a cat, you might not necessarily smell the smell of them unless you, like, when you walk in your house, you get it, or stuff like that. Or, you go into somebody else's house that doesn't do maybe a great job of, cleaning up the way that they should, and you kind of get blasted in the face, but they have no idea. It's one of those kind of things where your body, when you end up getting a new sensation, when you end up getting a new, again, smell, a new touch, a new whatever, your brain pays attention to it. But if it's there and if it's not really giving you any good information that you need, then your brain kind of like ramps down the amount that you end up paying attention to it. Same thing happens with a watch. Same thing happens with that. The same thing is supposed to happen with pain. Pain is supposed to be something that's supposed to stop you from doing something. But if it's supposed to stop you from doing things that are actively hurting you. So if you are going through and um, if you are not basically if it's something that's kind of random, it should be something that kind of like shuts down. If it's not actually like a painful kind of a thing, you should be able to like move through it, or you should be able to do something else. Again, sometimes, like obviously people get like major injuries and other kinds of stuff like that, and you can't walk off the pain, but pain is something that should kind of ramp down. There's a whole handful of different things that you can do in order to make that pain get better. Obviously, chiropractic treatments, things like rest and technique that I do at the office, those other kind of things can be helpful. But one of the things is that if somebody's smoking on a regular basis, they're not getting the amount of oxygen that they get that they should be getting. Those people can end up having more pain. Same kind of thing with somebody who's not breathing well, they can end up having a little bit more pain than what they would if they were doing things and breathing right. Okay. So the next step is that besides all of this other kind of stuff, one of the things that you can do is that you can actually try to correct that position, and you can try to make your parasympathetics kind of like get bumped up, right? So you can do this parasympathetic posture break, right? This can kind of like help to fix that stress that's there. There's another exercise that I teach people that's called Brugger's, which is actually a really good exercise, which is very similar to this. But this is basically going to be getting into that position where notice how your arms are up and out. You're rotating your hands and your palms up, and you're kind of going, keeping your arms fairly straight. And you're trying to rotate up, and then you're pulling your shoulders back and you're lifting your chin up towards the sky, right? Again, that you're trying to break that whole like down and in, and that like, like almost like you're trying to like curl up and you're hiding, or you're about ready to fight and, like, curling up like you're in a boxing kind of position, like you're Mike Tyson or something like that, right? The idea is that this kind of a thing and like being guarded and everything, it's trying to get yourself opened up and try to more stimulate the parasympathetics that you can get into. Again, you can get yourself out there again and just try it. Go ahead and pull those shoulders back and down, right? Not up here like this with your shoulders up around your head, but pull your shoulders back and down. Take your hands, open up your hands, and you want to basically like open up. I mean, rotate this down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So you want to try to take your arms out like this. You want to take your hands and you want to turn them back this way as you're doing it, keeping your arms fairly straight, opening up, lifting up the chin, and taking big deep breaths in while you do it. Okay. Again, that should feel really, really good. You should be more relaxed when you get done with it. You should be breathing a little bit slower and deeper as you do it. And then hopefully it continues that slower, deeper breathing when you get done. And then when you get done, you also should have a little bit better posture. Again, this is something that you can do, once an hour, once every half hour. Again, one of those things where you can either set a timer on your phone, or you can have an appointment that you snooze all day. If you use like Outlook or some other kind of program, you can use some of those things in order to actually like loosen yourself up and not just be in that position all day long. Because again, people will get in this position and they'll be all day long typing on their computer. And then when they get done with it, they drive home, right? If you're not working from home, right? But people will drive around and they get curled up in this position with their chin sticking out and all of this, which puts stress on your neck, and it causes you to have problems with the breathing. And then people will sit there and they'll just slump down and they'll be playing with their phone all day, right? So people don't do enough of that extension and opening up of the chest, which can be part of the issue and some of the problems that are there, right? The other thing that you can do is try to focus on that breathing with the diaphragm, right? And not breathing with the chest. So you can go through and you can sit yourself up, again, just like it shows in the picture, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, and just kind of take a couple of deep breaths in. And what you want to do is try to feel. So push in a little bit and see which one is actually breathing. So you don't want to be too high up on the belly. You don't want to be like on the picture here. You don't want to be like up here. You want to be down here lower on your actual belly button. So take a big deep breath in. And again, you can see that, and in the picture here, you can see that I'm breathing, or I've got some breathing with my chest, but my belly is breathing way more, right? I'm not going to show you my big belly when I do it, right? But what's going to happen is that you want to take a big deep breath in and breathe it out, and the belly should be breathing more. Usually I have people will do it, and you should be able to actually isolate this, right? And this is really, really hard for some people to do. Some people get it, and it's like they get it and then they get it down. But you should be able to tighten up your chest, right? So I do that. I was just breathing with my belly. I was not breathing with my chest at all. You should be able to tighten up your chest. You should be able to tighten up your belly and just breathe with your chest. You should also, and this is the thing that's really, really hard, is that you should be able to tighten up both your chest and your belly and be able to just breathe with your back, which is a really, really hard thing to do. This is what certain people will call breathing behind the shield, where it's like you have your abs like contracted and tight, like someone's going to be trying to punch you in the stomach or something like that. It's something that you can do, like if you're like out doing exercises and you're doing core work and those kind of things. But you can have your chest and your belly tight, but you can actually be using your back to breathe, which is, again, it's a harder kind of a thing to do, but it's something that you can do. So again, the idea is that when you want to put one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and you want to take a big deep breath in, and you want to try to stick your belly out when you're breathing in. So as you breathe in, you want to try to like make your belly bigger as you're doing it. And then when you get done, then you want to let it go, right? So taking a big deep breath in and letting it go out from there. I believe that I also have another YouTube video that I might link up here, or I might send that one out as well, which is me actually going through like a breathing assessment and showing somebody how to actually do the breathing. Because a lot of times this works a little bit better when you're laying on your back. And if you really aren't getting an idea with it, you can actually lay face down and you can do what we call crocodile breathing, where you're actually like laying against like, either on the ground, it could be a bed or something like that, but where you're feeling your body weight pushing on your chest, pushing on your belly, and that can be a really good feedback for somebody who's having an issue, right? So again, you want to do a couple of different respirations like that, seeing which way that you're actually breathing. But in the end, what you want to try to do is tighten up the chest and not do as much of the breathing with the chest, and then try to take 5 breaths with just your belly, right? So 5 conscious abdominal breaths, and this is something that you can do multiple times a day. So when you go through and you do the other exercise where you're doing that parasympathetic, like the postural relief kind of a thing, you can go through and hold that for a minute. And then when you get done with that, just try to do 5 big, deep abdominal breaths. And that's something that you can do in order to help kind of like work on that breathing and try to changing those patterns of breathing throughout the day. Again, as you work on it, it's something that gradually starts to change. It's not like it usually like clicks in. It's like you get aware of your posture, you start breathing, and then you just notice like, oh, okay, well, I end up breathing better throughout the day, right? With all of this stuff, you can end up having a more complete respiratory kind of assessment. That would be something that we could do for you if you were to come into the office, where basically we can go through, we could do this assessment for you so you can know whether or not you're actually breathing, whether or not it's you or a loved one or whatever. And again, this is a really easy kind of a thing to do. So that would be something that I'd recommend. You can call the office or you can make an appointment. If you have any other issues, obviously we can deal with those as well. So again, you make 23,000 breaths per day. So the idea is that we want to try to make each of those work a little bit better, have a little bit better health, improve your longevity. You can do rehabilitation on the breathing, and you can actually, if you're not able to hold that breath that we were talking about earlier, if you're not able to hold that for 30 seconds, there's ways that you can improve that. There's ways that you can end up doing some of these things. And what's kind of crazy is that for a lot of people with doing some of the breathing stuff and improving their breathing, it does help with anxiety issues and other kinds of stuff like that. Again, it's not from a psychology perspective, but it's, people that end up having issues with their breath are anxious in general. So if you can end up improving your breathing, that can be something that can help decrease your anxiety, decrease some of the issues that you might have. That's not saying that you're going to do some breathing and then you can go off any of these anxiety medications, but maybe you can improve, and maybe eventually you might be able to with help of your medical doctor. So again, the idea is that You don't want to just breathe to survive. You want to be able to try to improve the breathing so that you're thriving. You want to breathe through your brain. You want to try to have a healthy life. It should be free of pain. It should be free of stress. And you should, kind of work from there. So again, remember that health is your greatest asset, and you want to try to make sure that you can protect it. So thank you very much for watching this. I do appreciate that. Um, and we will go from there. If there's any questions, we can go ahead and I can answer them in the chat. And that's about it. All right. So if there's no questions, thank you very much. Have a good day. Remember to get a couple of big, deep breaths in. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.